Hello, I'm here to talk to you about composting today. I'm sure many of you already know what composting is, and some of you probably already compost already. But for those of you who don't, compost is a resource, it's a soil additive that is derived entirely from organic material. And organic material is anything that was alive, or used to be alive, or comes from something that was alive. And so, essentially, composting is a form of recycling. Just like you would recycle a tin can and divert it from being a waste to being a resource, you can divert organic material, which we often throw out, and instead compost it and turn it into a resource that we can then use to grow food or other plants. And so, what is compost? Compost is, according to the EPA, it is a nutrient-rich material that contains humus. And humus is a soil science term that is basically just the top layer of soil in many ecosystems that is rich in organic matter. And it's a stable material that doesn't decompose any further. And so compost is similar to humus, but it's created from a concerted process that humans do of piling organic matter in a generally specific way to create compost. And as an agriculture student, I take particular interest in it because I look at the U.S. food system and it's largely based off petroleum fertilizers, and while there are a lot of benefits to petroleum fertilizers, increasingly there are downsides. One of the biggest downsides is that it's derived from petroleum, which is a non-renewable resource. So that means that our food system is non-renewable as long as we are so reliant on petroleum-based fertilizer. And so that's where compost can come in, because it is renewable. And so I see compost as being a very important way to ensure that our food system can feed us indefinitely and feed future generations. So how is compost made? It's actually kind of like an animal. It's a good metaphor actually, because like animals, compost needs air, it needs water, and it needs food. Those are the essential components. And specifically, it needs carbon-based food and nitrogen-based food, or carbon-based materials, or browns, nitrogen-based materials, or greens. And so, Cornell Cooperative Extension can tell you all about the different ways to set up a good compost, but essentially, you're going to want 2 browns for every 1 green, 2 units of brown for every 1 green. And so when you're setting up a compost, there are a bunch of ways to do this. First, you want to have your compost pile close to your house, and so this will make it much easier for you to dump your compost, or your food scraps into your compost, and it makes it much less of a chore. So you can even have it right outside your kitchen window. And once you've found a good location for your compost pile, you're gonna have to decide of what kind of bin you want to use. So you're not just gonna want to pile it, you're gonna want something to contain that pile. And you can buy compost bins at the store, or you can use wood pallets. But one of the best ways to make a compost bin is by using fence, and by using a length of fence and then creating a cylinder with it by tying the ends together. And so after you do this, you throw some sticks down into the bottom of the pile, step on it, and then that'll create a pocket for air, which is one of the essential things for compost. So you have a pocket of air underneath your compost pile, and then you can throw some browns in to start your pile, and then on top of the browns you can start putting your kitchen scraps. And so in general, every bucket of kitchen scraps you're going to want to add 2 buckets of dry plant material, like leaves, like sawdust. And so you're going to want that ratio. And if your compost pile is going too slowly, then you might want to add water, or you might want to add more greens. And if your compost is smelling, then you're going to want to add more browns, dry plant material. And so those are some ways to gauge how your compost is doing. And so there's 2 general types of compost. There's hot compost and there's cold compost. Hot compost is, and the 2 just refer to how hot the piles actually get, because the breaking down of organic matter can actually create quite a lot of heat. And so when the pile gets hot, it's generally the larger piles that get hot, at least 3 feet in diameter or bigger, get really hot and hot enough to kill pathogens and kill seeds. And the heat also helps to break down the organic material faster. But cold compost piles are fine as well. They just take a little bit longer. And so this is generally how you do a backyard compost. You want it to be about as moist as a wet sponge that you squeeze dry, or that you squeeze the water out of so that it's damp. And then there are other kinds of composting as well, such as industrial composting, vermicomposting, and human manure composting. And they all have their pros and cons. Industrial composting is great for cities and for municipalities who want to incorporate it systemically. And so this is going to look very similar to our recycling system and our trash system, just segregating organic waste and setting it off to an industrial composting facility that will have huge windrows compost piles. And they have their own set of infrastructure and methods. And then there's vermicomposting, which is also great for cities on an individual scale. And you can do that. Vermicomposting is a composting with worms instead of microorganisms as the main agent to break down the organic material. And this is easy to do. You just put some worms in a bin with some sawdust or other organic material and start putting your food scraps in, and then you can harvest your compost pretty quickly. And then lastly, there's human manure composting, which is the process of composting human waste like excrement, and it uses far less water than toilets, so it's really good in places that are scarce in terms of water. And it's also, according to the Human Manure Handbook, it's crucial for keeping that nutrient cycle because right now we're taking two resources, clean water in this country, potable clean water, and our excrement, which is actually can be a fertilizer once it's composted, and we're turning it into a problem, whereas instead we could be turning it into a resource. And so the Human Manure Handbook has a lot of information on that, but generally it's a very similar process to normal composting. It just requires finer carbon material, and it requires a hot composting and a slightly longer time and a longer time to compost to make sure that all the pathogens are gone. And so this is all you really need to know about composting to do it for yourself. There are a bunch of different ways, and yeah, composting in my mind is very important in creating a sustainable food system, one that will last and endure rather than one that is dependent on petroleum-based fertilizers, which are a non-renewable resource. So backyard composting is very easy, and in general, compost needs water, oxygen, carbon-based materials, and nitrogen-based materials, and that's all you really need to know. Thank you.